everybody, welcome back in. It's another Photoshop tutorial with Mr. Kern. And today what we're going to do is we're going to apply a kind of a zoom blur to your photos. Now, it's really simple, and honestly, it works really well with what we've been doing in class with the gradient tools and the different layer masks. Super simple though. And it actually adds quite a bit to a lot of photos. And it's going to look a little something like this. You see this blur off to the side here. I'll show you how to pull it off. Super simple. It'll be great. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use this photo here that I found. It's on Unsplash. Photographer Himanshu Singh put this one together. Really cool photo. I love the colors in here. We already have kind of a blurry background here, but I want to emphasize even further here on this girl's face. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is the first thing we need to do is we need to create a copy of our layer, and you'll see why here in just a moment. So to do that, what we can do is over here in your layers on the right hand side on the bottom, if we right click that, time to go to class. If we right click that, we're going to hit duplicate layer. Okay, so duplicate layer. What do we want to name it as? We want to name this one, I'm going to call it blur. Okay, super simple, blur. We have our blur and we have our regular background. Now the background one is locked. We can leave it like that because honestly, we're not going to touch it. All of our work is going to be done on this blur layer. Okay, so follow me with this. In the top of your screen, we're going to go up to where it says filter, and we're going to go down to where it says blur, and we are going to choose radial blur. Okay, now you can play around with a couple of these other ones. Honestly, the way that we're going to do this, it's all going to kind of do the same thing. Of just your blur can look a little different, but radial blur is what we're going to be messing with here. Now, the next thing you see that pops up is this screen here. Now, your computer may actually be showing you in your background what your blur is going to look like. Personally, for mine, it doesn't. So I have to kind of guess at it. For an amount, I don't want a crazy amount of blur. I'm gonna go with 40. I really kind of want to I want the colors to be there. And then you have options for spin or zoom. Spin is kind of like that going down the tunnel, okay? And zoom is that like the light speed, think of like Star Wars or something. So those are your two differences between those two, spin or zoom, and you can choose either one. Personally, for myself, I'm gonna go with zoom. I think that'll work well for what I'm trying to do here, but you can mess around with either one. Now, over here on the right-hand side, you have this, and this says blur center, okay? Now, this is where you can choose where your blur starts from, where it emanates from. And so I want it to be kind of in the middle of the face here. And unfortunately, I kind of have to guess at it. And I know that it's over here, kind of in that third horizontal line and a little bit up. I'm gonna guess it's right about there. So I'm gonna hit OK. And I think that did what I wanted to do. And it's obviously what we've done so far, not very good for our photo. We've blurred it quite a bit, but you'll see where I'm going with this in just a moment. Okay, so hang tight with me, but you can see that the middle of my blur starts right about there on the nose. I would prefer it to be a little bit higher. In fact, you know what? I'm gonna Control Z. I'm gonna do it one more time just for fun. And again, I'm gonna go just a little bit higher. Hit OK. That's just about perfect. Okay. So depending on what you want to do with your photo, you could turn that down and then just have her face there, and then you'd have some blur happening outside of that. But what I want to show you here is another trick at this. Okay. So we have this set up. What we want to do next is we want to add in a layer mask. Now, to do that, again, bottom right, you have the square with the little circle cut out in the middle of it. We're going to click that, and you can see that you have your layer mask that it's attached to your layer over here. Okay. We want to make sure that we're clicked on that layer mask. Okay. And over here on the left-hand side, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 tools down. If we right click that, we have our gradient tool, our paint bucket tool, and our 3D drop material drop tool. We're going to choose our gradient tool. Okay, you might have paint bucket showing, but gradient is what we're after here. Okay, with your gradient tool on the top in our tool specific options, we're going to go to where it says click and edit the gradient. We're going to click that. We're going to choose basics, and I'm going to choose this last option here. Okay. All right, so we got black in the top left, white in the bottom right, a little bit of gray in between. Okay. And then over here on the right-hand side, I'm going to choose the second option here. This is going to be a radial gradient, which basically means that it starts as a circle, works its way out. Okay. You could try, this one's kind of neat too, the diamond gradient. But for now, I'm going to stick with the radial gradient. Okay. What I'm going to do with this is I'm going to start what I want most clear in this photo. Okay. I'm going to pick between the middle of her eyes here, and I'm going to click and hold, and I'm going to drag. Now, we've played with gradients before. We know that the further that we drag, class starting. We know that the further that we drag, the more intense that gradient is. Okay, so what we can do here, I'm just going to go out to about this point here, and I'm going to let go. Okay, and what you can see is that over here on my layer mask, it has created a circle gradient. And what we know about layer masks is when you paint black on a layer mask, it hides that from the image. Okay, so let's talk about what's happening here. We've created blur, okay, with our blur image. Background image is perfectly fine. It's exactly this, it's the original photo, okay? And what we're doing with the black is we're hiding the blur and showing off the background photo. Does that make sense? So I'm gonna do this again. I want a little bit more out of the face. So I'm gonna undo that, Control Z, and I'm going to drag from the middle of the face out to about the hair there. Let's see what that does. Yeah, I think that's really cool. I would like to get a little bit more of her hair less blurry. I think that's about as perfect as I could have gotten with that. So, a couple ways to change this, okay? A couple ways to modify what this looks like. First of all, your blur options. When you go into blur, your the amount of blur that it does, if it's not looking quite right, maybe take down that blur a little bit. If you want more blur, turn that up. Okay, and again, you can play around with the radial blur versus the diamond blur. Sometimes that helps too. Another thing that kind of changes the way this looks is if I click on this layer here, my blur layer, and I turn down the opacity. Remember, everything behind it is not blurred at all. So if I turn this down, it's going to turn down my blur the more that I do it. Okay. So I could play around with that to increase or decrease the amount of blur. And you can see if I turn it down all the way, exactly where we started. But I really feel like this is a really good, maybe 90%. 90% I think looks right, okay? So there you go, quick and easy, blur on a portrait. It really makes that face pop and kind of removes maybe a more confusing background, okay? More emphasis, focal point on the face. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed yourself. Can't wait to see what you guys come up with. Good luck.